Hi, I'm John Zombro with The Lifetime Athlete, and thank you for joining me in this video today. This is part 3 in our 3-part series, Understanding Human Movement. And part 3 is all about interventions and optimization. In part 1, I went over triplanar movement and talked about how humans can manage pressure and tension to wind and unwind their bodies, their fascial systems, their joints, linkages, and levers to create that magical, masterful human movement that we all possess. In part 2, we take a look at analysis, or how to assess motion with respect to quality and quantity, and to identify the root causes of dysfunction. Now today in part 3, we're going to take a look at the specific types of interventions that we utilize to optimize movement in all of our athletes. And so this is applicable, again, whether you are a client of mine who's receiving some online physical therapy or performance coaching, you're a curious athlete or fitness enthusiast looking to investigate some of these things for yourself, or you're a clinician who's trying to get better results with your clients. All of these things apply when we think about the comprehensive picture of understanding human movement. This is all about becoming a movement smith, and that's one of my favorite terms, and it's someone who owns position, each and every position, and also has mastery of motion in any direction from those positions. And that's really our goal. It's a beautiful thing to accomplish. It's perhaps something that we're going to chase through our lifespans, but nonetheless, the first thing that we want to do when we're working with a client, or this is at least how I do it, is we want to view what is going on. So in other words, we have to come to this understanding, what is it that isn't quite working right, and what are we going to do about it? How can we recognize and appreciate it? So that can be done quite simply with a photo or a screenshot, and those are stills, but they're oftentimes very effective at seeing something that's happening in a very specific position. Now, more effective in some cases is using video. And I like to run video at normal speed, primarily for myself, because I like to appreciate motion as it's occurring. And as a master clinician, I think you'll get a feel for that, where you don't always need to slow it down and stop it. However, for your clients, it's extremely important that you can again, get this understanding and agreement in a non-condemning fashion. So I like to use slow motion to show clients what their movement patterns are looking like, and then also to use freeze frames so that we can stop and take a look and discuss what the mechanisms are for, again, what we're seeing and what direction we might want to head with our training or treatment. Another tip that's good to use whenever you're using video is if you can capture the sound, especially when we're talking about foot strikes on the ground. So that could be with running gait analysis or jumping or certain sports motions, which create sound. And if we have a chance to compare side to side, the symmetry of the sound is often very telling. So just a quick pro tip for you there. Now, let's use examples in today's video talking about running gait, because running gait analysis is something that I do a lot of, and a lot of my clients are very interested in it in ways to either decrease their pain or increase their performance. So just as an arbitrary example, I would say, let's imagine that we're seeing a runner who is excessively heel striking. So there is some controversy in the literature when a person has a shoe on. If they make a soft heel strike and they roll through it quickly to the midfoot, that may be less of a problem. But what we're talking about here is an overt or hard heel strike that's happening with a straight or locked knee too far forward or out in front of the body. That's been shown to increase ground reaction forces, decrease performance, and increase injury in almost all cases. So this is what we've got. We've got excessive heel striking, and we're going to appreciate that again through video analysis and discussion. Now, next up, after I think about how to view movement, I want to address it. And so in addressing the movement discrepancy or the dysfunction or impairment that may be present, we typically use corrective exercises. And here's where the money is, because you really only want to select 1 to 3 exercises. And even once you've done that, perhaps find the best one of those 3 that fits for this specific person, patient, client, or athlete. Allow them to feel the correction that we're working on. And this has to be done in an open time frame, especially when we're working with things like strength and mobility and motor control. And it takes time for the body to adapt. Then what we're going to do is adjust and advance these corrective exercises until we reach the target goal, or what we think is ideal or possible or potential for the athlete in question. So if I think about, well, what type of corrective exercise might I select? Well, one example is with a heel striking athlete, I might utilize a strike jump. So a strike jump can be performed with or without load, such as holding dumbbells at the side or weighting the body in other means. And we can use anywhere from a low to perhaps a medium box height. But that strike jump allows them to get away from the heel striking mechanics and start to ingrain a motor pattern and get a feel for, again, what a proper midfoot, or in some cases forefoot strike is going to feel like. So once we've viewed and addressed, we're going to go then to practice. And practice is essentially putting the movement pattern that we're working on improving into the sport context. So that's just where the athlete gets reps doing the thing, doing their sport or primary activity. And these things go back and forth. In other words, practice and then address. We are adjusting those corrective exercises, and we're integrating some of the practice in the training session as well, but they're ultimately leading to the same outcome. How we work, though, in practice is very important. We want the athlete to get a lot of reps working on retraining or relearning how to move optimally. And so it's very important that we don't excessively fatigue them. We give them breaks. We always emphasize quality of execution. And what comes in here are cues. And so cues are those tips or suggestions that we give to an athlete. And I like to think of it this way. When I'm issuing cues, and hopefully when you're issuing cues to your clients and athletes, give them as little as possible, but as much as necessary. That's a really interesting way of looking at it. We don't want to flood the mind with too many things. In fact, if you want to confuse somebody, give them more than one thing to think about at a time. I've picked up some great advice regarding cues from Nick Winkelman's book, The Language of Coaching. I believe that's the title. Excellent book, and I'd recommend it for any coach or healthcare professional who's trying to work with people in a performance capacity. So when you look at cues, we have potentially three types. We have intrinsic cues, extrinsic cues, and analogous cues. So if we take our example where we've got the heel striking runner, we've been training him with the strike jump some, but now we've got him out there perhaps doing some running drills and some strides, and we're working on improving that gait pattern. Well, an intrinsic cue might be to say, activate your posterior chain. And so, when you hear that, you might think, oh, what exactly does that mean? And that's oftentimes what happens when we use intrinsic cues with an athlete. So we're telling him to activate the muscles in the calf and the hamstrings and the glutes, and to feel that tension and use that to drive the foot strike, which will help to get out of the heel striking pattern. Doesn't work that well. It's something that we can understand academically, but on the field or track or court might not be your best choice. Then you've got the extrinsic cue, and extrinsically might be saying, hey, land with your foot under your hip. So just trying to work on getting the foot closer to being under the hip, or if a plumb line was dropping down from the hip. In reality, the foot can be slightly in front of the hip in most gait patterns, but we don't want it way out there. So that cue can help many folks, but again, it's not so powerful it's not as powerful as an analogous cue. An analogous cue would be where I would just tell the athlete, when you put your foot down, strike like a cat paw with the claws extended. And in doing that, they're automatically going to recruit that posterior chain. They're going to pull the foot under the hip, and they're going to maintain good foot and ankle stiffness at initial contact. So that's really all we need to do, or at least in this case. And it's always a trial and error. If the exercise that we've been using or the cues aren't getting the result we want, we keep going back to the drawing board and fine-tuning and getting our results. So we've gone from view and address and practice. Now we have progress. How do we manage progression? Well, first of all, we do that patiently. we let that motor skill acquisition speak to us. And as we see the athlete getting more proficient and better, we add whatever we need to do to get to the desired outcome. And so that might be adjusting things in terms of speed or load. And in any good experiment, I like to do, or at least I like to introduce or manage one dependent variable at a time. So if I'm going to increase speed, I'm probably not going to increase load. And that depends on, again, the specific exercises or athlete in context. But speed and load are important. Also task complexity. There are many skills that require steps to master higher degrees of complexity. And we also want to look at environmental challenge. And that could be as much as different surfaces. It could be weather, but it can also be the presence of competition, crowds, bystanders, observers, noise, all of those things. And the better the athlete gets at executing optimal movement, the less he or she is distracted or confounded by any of those variables. So that's really the key. And when we're using progressions, we always want to continually assess and monitor what we're doing as needed. And eventually, our goal is that all of these things will become subconscious motor patterns that the athlete can then do reflexively and not have to go through these processes. That result is when the athlete becomes a movement smith. And technique then supports the highest output possible. And that equals max performance. Also, that ideal technique, and you notice I didn't say perfect because there may be no perfect, but ideal or optimal is what we're talking about, offers the least amount of tissue stress. So then we get athletic longevity. And you know what that means. And that's what we're all about here at the Lifetime Athlete. So guys, thank you so much for being with me today. If you have questions or comments, please shoot them out to me. And I hope you have a great day and got something out of understanding human movement, part 3.